Sarah Martinez never imagined her life would change during what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning at the field hospital. The 28-year-old Navy nurse had been stationed at the forward operating base in Southeast Asia for 8 months, treating wounded soldiers and civilians caught in the crossfire of regional conflicts. Her days blended together in a routine of bandages, medications, and comforting words spoken in broken local dialects she had picked up during her deployment. The base sat on a dusty plateau surrounded by dense jungle, serving as a crucial medical hub for operations throughout the region. Sarah worked alongside 12 other medical personnel, but she had earned a reputation for her calm demeanor under pressure and her ability to save lives when others had given up hope. The local commander, Colonel Williams, often praised her work in his reports, noting how she had successfully treated over 300 patients since her arrival. That morning started like any other. Sarah arrived at the medical tent before dawn, checking on the overnight patients and preparing for the day ahead. The wounded came in steady waves, soldiers with shrapnel wounds, locals with infections, children who had stepped on unexploded ordnance. She moved between beds with practiced efficiency, her hands steady as she changed dressings and administered pain medication. What Sarah didn't know was that Admiral Rebecca Harrison, the highest-ranking naval officer in the theater, had arrived at the base the previous evening for an unscheduled inspection. The Admiral was known throughout the military for her sharp mind and no-nonsense approach to leadership. She had risen through the ranks faster than any woman before her, earning respect through decisive action and an uncanny ability to spot talent in unexpected places. Admiral Harrison had spent her career in combat zones, but this visit was different. Intelligence reports suggested that enemy forces were planning a major assault on medical facilities throughout the region, targeting the very heart of humanitarian operations. She needed to assess the defensive capabilities of each base personally, and this remote outpost was considered one of the most vulnerable. As Sarah worked that morning, she noticed increased activity around the perimeter. More guards were posted, and she caught glimpses of unfamiliar faces in crisp uniforms moving through the compound. The base commander seemed tense, barking orders more sharply than usual. But Sarah kept her focus on her patients, knowing that whatever was happening outside the medical tent was beyond her control. The first sign of trouble came at 0800 hours when the radio crackled with reports of enemy movement in the surrounding jungle. Sarah looked up from the floor she was adjusting, catching the eye of Dr. Peterson, the senior medical officer. He nodded grimly and began checking their emergency supplies. They had drilled for this scenario countless times, but the reality felt different. By mid-morning, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Soldiers were digging defensive positions, and the medical staff received orders to prepare for mass casualties. Sarah helped move the most critical patients to a reinforced bunker while setting up a triage area that could handle multiple wounded arrivals simultaneously. Admiral Harrison observed these preparations from the command center, studying how each unit responded to the mounting threat. Her trained eye noted the efficiency of the medical team, particularly the young nurse who seemed to anticipate needs before they arose. Sarah moved through the chaos with a grace that impressed even the seasoned admiral, never rushing, but never wasting a moment. The enemy struck at 1,130 hours with a coordinated assault that caught even the prepared defenders off guard. Mortar rounds began falling across the compound, followed by small arms fire from multiple directions. Sarah found herself thrust into a nightmare scenario she had trained for, but never truly experienced, treating wounded soldiers while under direct enemy fire. As explosions rocked the base and bullets whistled overhead, Sarah discovered reserves of courage she never knew she possessed. The terrified young woman who had arrived 8 months earlier was gone, replaced by a focused professional who could insert in 4-line while ducking incoming rounds. She worked alongside Dr. Peterson and the other medical staff, but something inside her had changed in those first moments of combat. Admiral Harrison, coordinating the defense from the command bunker, watched through reinforced windows as the medical team continued their work despite the chaos outside. She saw Sarah running between wounded soldiers in the open courtyard, seemingly oblivious to the danger around her. The Admiral made a mental note about the young nurse's apparent fearlessness under fire. The initial assault lasted 47 minutes before enemy forces pulled back to regroup. In the relative quiet that followed, Sarah surveyed the damage around her. 3 soldiers lay wounded in her immediate area, and more casualties were being brought in every few minutes. Her uniform was torn and blood-stained, but her hands remained steady as she worked to stabilize the injured. What Sarah didn't realize was that this was only the beginning. Intelligence reports indicated that the enemy was planning a second, larger assault within hours. The Admiral knew that this small base would face its greatest test before the day was over, and she found herself particularly interested in seeing how the determined young nurse would handle what was coming next. The afternoon brought an eerie calm that experienced soldiers recognized as the quiet before a storm. Sarah used the lull to reorganize the medical supplies and check on her patients, but she could feel tension building throughout the base. Wounded soldiers spoke in hushed tones about the enemy's reputation for brutality, especially toward medical personnel who they viewed as legitimate military targets. Admiral Harrison emerged from the command center to personally inspect the defensive preparations. As she walked through the medical area, she observed Sarah treating a young soldier who had taken shrapnel to his leg. The nurse worked with remarkable composure, her voice calm and reassuring as she explained each step of the treatment to her frightened patient. "You're going to be fine, Martinez," Sarah said, using the soldier's last name with the familiarity of someone who had treated dozens like him. "This looks worse than it is. We'll get you cleaned up, and you'll be back to complaining about the food in no time." Her joke earned a weak smile from the wounded man, and Admiral Harrison noted how Sarah's presence seemed to calm not just her immediate patient, but other wounded soldiers within earshot. The Admiral approached Dr. Peterson, who was organizing medical supplies near the trauma bay. "Your nurse there," she said, nodding towards Sarah. "How long has she been in theater?" 8 months, Admiral, Dr. Peterson replied, glancing over at Sarah with obvious respect. "She's been exceptional, saved more lives than I can count, and never once complained about the conditions or asked for reassignment." The soldiers trust her completely. Admiral Harrison watched as Sarah moved efficiently between patients, checking vital signs and adjusting medications. There was something about the young woman's demeanor that suggested hidden depths, a resilience that went beyond basic medical training. The Admiral had seen thousands of military personnel under stress, and she recognized something special in Sarah's calm professionalism. At 1,500 hours, the radio crackled with alarming intelligence. Enemy forces had regrouped and were approaching the base from 3 directions simultaneously. This second assault would be larger and more coordinated than the morning attack. Worse yet, intercepted communications suggested that the enemy had specific orders to target medical facilities and personnel. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she heard the news, but her training kicked in immediately. She began preparing for mass casualties, setting up additional triage stations, and ensuring that critical supplies were easily accessible. As she worked, she noticed Admiral Harrison observing from a distance, but she remained focused on her preparations. The attack began with a massive explosion that shook the entire compound. A rocket-propelled grenade had struck the communications array, cutting the base off from outside support. Almost immediately, enemy fighters began pouring through breaches in the perimeter fence, their weapons targeting anything that moved. Sarah found herself in the middle of a battlefield, treating wounded soldiers while enemy forces advanced toward the medical area. The sound of automatic weapons fire filled the air, punctuated by the screams of wounded men and the shouts of defenders trying to hold their positions. She dragged a wounded soldier behind a concrete barrier, using her own body to shield him while she applied pressure to a severe abdominal wound. Dr. Peterson called out urgent instructions as casualties mounted, but Sarah was already anticipating his orders. She had grabbed additional supplies and established a makeshift aid station in what appeared to be the most protected area of the compound. Her movements were precise and purposeful, showing no hesitation despite the chaos around her. Admiral Harrison found herself in an impossible situation. As the ranking officer, she needed to coordinate the defense, but she was also witnessing something remarkable. The young nurse was performing under extreme pressure with a skill level that exceeded many combat veterans she had known. Sarah seemed to have an intuitive understanding of battlefield medicine that couldn't be taught in any classroom. The enemy assault intensified as fighters pushed deeper into the compound. Sarah could see muzzle flashes from weapons positions that were dangerously close to the medical area. She made a split-second decision that would change everything. Grabbing a fallen soldier's rifle, she took a defensive position while continuing to treat wounded personnel. "Nurse Martinez," Dr. Peterson shouted over the gunfire. "What are you doing?" "My job," Sarah replied without looking up from the soldier she was treating. She had positioned herself so she could provide medical care while maintaining a clear line of sight toward the approaching enemy. Her left hand worked steadily to stop bleeding while her right hand rested on the weapon she had never expected to need. Admiral Harrison watched this scene unfold with growing amazement. Sarah had transformed from a dedicated medical professional into something entirely different, a warrior who refused to abandon her primary mission even when faced with direct combat. The Admiral had seen plenty of brave soldiers in her career, but she had never witnessed this particular combination of medical skill and tactical awareness. The defining moment came when 3 enemy fighters broke through the defensive line and headed straight for the medical area. They had specific orders to eliminate medical personnel, viewing them as high-value targets. Sarah saw them coming and made a decision that would echo through military circles for years to come. Standing up from behind her cover, still holding medical supplies in one hand, Sarah Martinez prepared to defend her patients with everything she had. The quiet nurse who had arrived at the base 8 months earlier was about to reveal capabilities that no one, including herself, had suspected she possessed. Time seemed to slow as Sarah Martinez rose from behind the concrete barrier, her medical training warring with instincts she didn't know she possessed. The 3 enemy fighters advancing toward the medical area moved with deadly purpose, their weapons raised and ready to eliminate anyone they encountered. Behind Sarah, wounded soldiers lay helpless and vulnerable, depending entirely on her protection. Admiral Harrison watched from the command position, her hand instinctively moving toward her sidearm. The distance was too great for her to provide immediate assistance, and the ongoing battle prevented her from repositioning. She found herself witnessing what would either be a heroic last stand or something far more extraordinary. The first enemy fighter rounded the corner of the medical tent, his assault rifle sweeping the area for targets. Sarah stepped into his line of sight, and for a brief moment, both combatants froze. The fighter had expected to find cowering medical personnel, not a determined woman who met his gaze without flinching. That moment of hesitation cost him everything. Sarah's movements were fluid and precise, as if she had been preparing for this moment her entire life. She raised a rifle she had retrieved from the fallen soldier and fired 3 controlled shots that dropped the first attacker before he could react. Her medical background had given her an intimate knowledge of human anatomy, and she applied that knowledge with devastating effect. The second fighter appeared almost immediately, trying to flank around the medical supplies. Sarah had anticipated this move, repositioning herself to maintain cover while keeping her patients behind her. She engaged him with short, accurate bursts of fire, each shot placed with the same precision she used when inserting 4 lines or suturing wounds. Admiral Harrison felt her breath catch as she watched the scene unfold. Sarah was not simply firing wildly in panic. She was demonstrating tactical awareness and marksmanship skills that would have impressed seasoned infantry soldiers. Each movement was calculated, each shot deliberate, and through it all, she maintained her position protecting the wounded. The third enemy fighter proved more cautious, using the chaos of a larger battle to approach from an unexpected angle. Sarah caught movement in her peripheral vision and spun to engage, but the attacker had already taken aim. The shot that followed would have killed her if not for the fact that she was still thinking like a nurse, even in combat. As she dove for cover, Sarah's primary concern was not for her own safety, but for a critically wounded soldier who lay directly in the line of fire. She threw herself across his body, absorbing the impact that would have finished him while simultaneously returning accurate fire toward her attacker. The enemy fighter went down, but not before Sarah felt the burning pain of a bullet grazing her shoulder. The immediate threat neutralized, Sarah performed a quick assessment of her own wound while checking on her patient. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or major blood vessels. Painful, but not life-threatening. She applied a field dressing to herself with practiced efficiency, then returned to caring for the soldiers who needed her attention. Dr. Peterson reached her position moments later, having witnessed the entire engagement from his own defensive position. "Sarah, what the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice mixing amazement with concern. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "I don't know," Sarah replied honestly, her hands already working on another wounded soldier. "I've never done anything like that before. It just felt natural." She paused in her work, looking down at her own shaking hands with confusion. "I was just protecting my patients." Admiral Harrison arrived at the medical area as the larger battle began winding down. Enemy forces were retreating after suffering heavy casualties, but her attention was focused entirely on the young nurse who had just eliminated 3 trained fighters with remarkable skill and composure. She had witnessed something that challenged her understanding of human potential under extreme stress. "Nurse Martinez," the Admiral said, her voice carrying the authority of years in command. "I need you to tell me exactly what happened here." Sarah looked up from her patient, suddenly aware that she was being addressed by the highest-ranking officer on the base. Her uniform was torn and blood-stained, her shoulder bandaged, but her eyes remained clear and focused. "3 enemy fighters threatened my patients, Admiral. I neutralized the threat." The simple directness of her response impressed Admiral Harrison even more than her actions had. There was no bravado, no attempt to dramatize what had occurred. Sarah had identified a problem and solved it with the same methodical approach she applied to medical procedures. "Have you had advanced combat training?" the Admiral asked, studying Sarah's face for any sign of deception. "No, ma'am. Standard basic training when I enlisted, but nothing beyond that. I focused entirely on my medical specialization." Sarah's confusion was genuine. She couldn't explain what had happened any better than anyone else could. Admiral Harrison spent the next hour observing Sarah as she continued treating wounded soldiers. The nurse showed no signs of combat stress or emotional breakdown. Instead, she worked with the same calm professionalism she had displayed before the battle, as if eliminating enemy fighters was simply another aspect of her job. As reports came in from across the compound, a remarkable picture emerged. Sarah Martinez, a Navy nurse with no specialized combat training, had single-handedly eliminated an entire enemy squad while simultaneously providing medical care to wounded soldiers. Her actions had prevented a massacre in the medical area and saved countless lives. The Admiral found herself facing a decision that would impact not just Sarah's career, but potentially change how the military viewed the intersection of medical and combat roles. She had discovered something unprecedented, a person who could function at the highest level in both domains simultaneously. The question now was what to do with this discovery. In the days following the battle, word of Sarah Martinez's actions spread throughout the military network with the speed of wildfire. Admiral Harrison had filed a detailed report that was classified at the highest levels, but stories had a way of traveling through unofficial channels. Soldiers who had been present during the fight spoke in amazed whispers about the nurse who had saved their lives while eliminating an entire enemy squad. Sarah herself remained largely unaware of the growing attention her actions were attracting. She continued her daily routine of treating patients and maintaining the medical facility, though she noticed increased security around the base and occasional visits from high-ranking officers who seemed more interested in observing her than inspecting the facilities. Admiral Harrison spent considerable time reviewing Sarah's military records, searching for clues that might explain her extraordinary performance under combat conditions. The files revealed a consistently exemplary service record, with commendations for medical excellence and leadership potential, but nothing that suggested advanced combat capabilities. What the Admiral found more intriguing was Sarah's background before military service. She had grown up on a ranch in rural Montana, where she had learned to hunt and shoot from an early age. Her father had been a Marine Corps veteran who had instilled in her both a sense of discipline and a respect for precision. These skills had apparently remained dormant until the moment they were desperately needed. Dr. Peterson approached Admiral Harrison 3 days after the battle with concerns about Sarah's psychological state. "She's acting like nothing unusual happened," he reported. "Most people would be traumatized after their first kill, especially 3 in rapid succession. But she seems completely unaffected." The Admiral decided to speak with Sarah directly, calling her to a private meeting in the base commander's office. As Sarah entered the room, Admiral Harrison noted the same calm demeanor that had impressed her during the battle. There was no visible stress, no signs of the emotional aftermath that typically followed such intense combat experiences. "How are you feeling, Nurse Martinez?" the Admiral asked, studying Sarah's expression carefully. "Fine, Admiral. My shoulder is healing well, and I've been able to maintain full functionality in the medical area." Sarah's response was clinical and professional, focused on objective measures of performance rather than emotional states. "I'm not asking about your wound," Admiral Harrison clarified. "I'm asking about how you're processing what happened during the battle. You killed 3 people while treating wounded soldiers. That's not a normal experience for anyone." Sarah considered the question seriously before responding. "I understand that what happened was unusual, Admiral. But in the moment, it felt like the only logical response to the situation. My patients were in danger, and I had the means to protect them. The fact that it required lethal force doesn't change the fundamental nature of my responsibility." The Admiral found herself impressed once again by Sarah's straightforward analysis. Most soldiers struggled with the psychological impact of taking life in combat, but Sarah seemed to view it as simply another tool in her arsenal for protecting those under her care. This perspective suggested either remarkable emotional resilience or a concerning detachment from normal human responses. Over the following weeks, Admiral Harrison arranged for a series of discrete evaluations and tests. Sarah underwent psychological assessments that revealed no signs of trauma or abnormal emotional responses. Physical evaluations confirmed exceptional hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness. Most importantly, tactical simulations demonstrated that her combat performance during the battle had not been a fluke. The testing revealed something unprecedented in military medicine. Sarah possessed an extremely rare combination of traits that allowed her to function simultaneously as both healer and warrior. Her medical training had enhanced rather than conflicted with her combat instincts, creating a synergy that maximized her effectiveness in both roles. Sarah began to understand that her actions had attracted significant attention when she was summoned to a secure communication facility for a video conference with Pentagon officials. The call included several admirals and generals she recognized only from photographs, along with medical corps commanders and special operations leaders. "Nurse Martinez," the ranking official began, "your actions at Forward Operating Base Delta have generated considerable interest at the highest levels of command. We're exploring the possibility of expanding your role beyond traditional medical duties." The conversation that followed would change the trajectory of Sarah's military career. The officials outlined a classified program designed to develop personnel capable of operating effectively in both medical and combat roles. Sarah's demonstrated abilities made her an ideal candidate for this experimental initiative. "I'm honored by the consideration," Sarah responded carefully, "but I want to be clear about my priorities. My primary commitment is to saving lives through medical care. I would only accept additional responsibilities if they enhanced rather than compromise my ability to serve in that capacity." Admiral Harrison, participating in the conference from her field headquarters, smiled at Sarah's response. The young nurse continued to demonstrate the combination of principled thinking and practical wisdom that had caught the Admiral's attention in the first place. The officials explained that the new program would provide Sarah with advanced combat training while expanding her medical capabilities. She would work with elite units in situations where traditional medical support was impossible, serving as both combat medic and tactical asset. The role would be dangerous, but it would also maximize her unique abilities to save lives in the most challenging circumstances. Sarah asked for time to consider the offer, but Admiral Harrison could see the interest in her eyes. The nurse had discovered capabilities within herself that she never knew existed, and the prospect of developing those abilities further clearly appealed to her sense of professional growth and service. As the conference concluded, Admiral Harrison remained behind to speak privately with the Pentagon officials. "What you're seeing in Nurse Martinez is genuinely exceptional," she told them. "I've served with the best warriors and the most skilled medical professionals in our military. She's the first person I've encountered who represents the absolute pinnacle of both disciplines simultaneously." 6 months after the battle that changed everything, Sarah Martinez stood in a secure briefing room at Naval Special Warfare Command, no longer just a nurse, but something entirely new in military structure. The transformation had been remarkable, though she remained fundamentally the same person who had dedicated her life to saving others. The experimental program had exceeded all expectations. Sarah had completed advanced combat training that typically took years to master, absorbing tactical knowledge with the same precision she had once applied to medical procedures. Her instructors reported that she approached warfare with the same methodical mindset that had made her an exceptional nurse, viewing each engagement as a problem to solve rather than chaos to survive. Admiral Harrison had personally overseen much of Sarah's development, recognizing that they were creating something unprecedented in military history. The Admiral had become not just Sarah's commanding officer, but her mentor, guiding her through the complex challenges of balancing her dual nature as healer and warrior. "Your first mission briefing," Admiral Harrison said, handing Sarah a classified folder, "will demonstrate why this program was created. Traditional special operations teams are highly effective at combat missions, but they lack the medical expertise to save lives in complex scenarios. Traditional medical personnel are experts at saving lives, but they can't operate effectively in hostile environments without protection." Sarah opened the folder to find details about a humanitarian crisis in a war-torn region where enemy forces had specifically targeted medical facilities. Civilian casualties were mounting, but traditional relief efforts had failed because medical teams couldn't reach the affected areas safely, and military units couldn't provide adequate medical care to those they rescued. The mission would require Sarah to infiltrate hostile territory, establish secure medical facilities, and provide both combat support and life-saving medical care to civilian populations. She would work with a small team of specially trained operators who understood her dual role and could support both aspects of her mission. "I've read the reports about what you accomplished during the base attack," said Commander Roberts, the special operations officer who would coordinate her mission support. "What impressed me most wasn't your marksmanship or tactical awareness, though both were exceptional. It was the fact that you never stopped being a nurse, even when you were forced to become a warrior." Sarah studied the mission parameters carefully, her mind already working through the logistics of combining medical operations with combat effectiveness. The challenge excited her in a way that purely medical assignments never had. She had discovered that her greatest satisfaction came from pushing the boundaries of what was considered possible. The team she would work with had been specially selected and trained to support her unique capabilities. Each member was cross-trained in basic medical procedures while maintaining their specialized combat skills. They understood that their primary mission was to create conditions where Sarah could save lives, even if that meant engaging enemy forces directly. Training exercises had demonstrated the effectiveness of this new approach. Sarah could establish and defend medical treatment areas that traditional units couldn't maintain, while providing combat support that purely medical teams couldn't offer. The combination had proven devastatingly effective in simulated scenarios. Admiral Harrison watched Sarah prepare for her first mission with a mixture of pride and concern. She had created something remarkable, but she was also sending a young woman into extraordinary danger. The Admiral knew that Sarah's unique abilities made her invaluable, but they also made her a high-priority target for enemy forces. Remember, the Admiral told Sarah during their final briefing, "You're not just representing yourself out there. You're proving the viability of an entirely new approach to military medicine. Every life you save, every mission you complete successfully demonstrates the value of what we've built here." Sarah understood the weight of responsibility she carried. She was no longer just treating individual patients, but pioneering a new way of thinking about the intersection of healing and warfare. The program's success would determine whether other personnel would have the opportunity to develop similar capabilities. The night before her departure, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 8 months earlier, she had been a dedicated but conventional Navy nurse, focused solely on treating wounded soldiers in a relatively secure medical facility. Now she was preparing to operate alone in hostile territory, responsible for both combat operations and complex medical procedures. What surprised her most was how natural the transition had felt. The skills she had developed as a nurse, precision under pressure, quick decision-making, the ability to remain calm in crisis situations, had translated seamlessly to combat operations. Her medical knowledge had enhanced her tactical effectiveness, while her combat training had made her a more capable medical professional. As her transport lifted off from the base, Sarah carried with her the knowledge that she represented something new in military history. She was no longer just a nurse who had been forced to fight, but a new kind of warrior whose primary weapon was her ability to save lives while eliminating threats to those under her protection. Admiral Harrison watched the aircraft disappear into the darkness, knowing that Sarah Martinez was about to begin writing a new chapter in military medicine. The quiet nurse who had once seemed unremarkable had become something extraordinary, a symbol of human potential that emerged when dedication, training, and necessity converged at exactly the right moment. The program Sarah had helped create would eventually train dozens of similar personnel, each building on the foundation she had established. But she would always be remembered as the first, the nurse who had discovered her true calling in the crucible of combat, and had shown the world that the greatest warriors were often those whose primary mission was not to take life, but to preserve it.